the Planning and Zoning meeting to order. Stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, yes.
Roll call.
Yeah, 4 members are here. Wyatt Urban is not present for his quorum, so we can hold the meeting tonight.
Excellent. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Any discussion? Changes?
Motion to approve the consent agenda is presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. New business. The first item is Meadows at Greenfield 8th plat, final plat.
Yep, I got some brief comments. Steve Saylor is the engineer for this application. He is joining us online today, representing GJM Development. GJM Development has submitted the Meadows at Greenfield 8th plat, final plat, proposing 38 single-family lots on 22.91 acres and a couple of open space tracts. The location of this is at the southern connection of Foxtail Drive and Fishing Lane, and it wraps around to the southern end of, sorry about that, Prairie Creek Drive. And so this is the phase that makes the connection. So we have good emergency services access. Also, as part of this phase, they'll be installing a gravity sanitary sewer through this phase. It also goes through future phase 9 and connects to interceptor line that we have along the Fishing River. That will allow the Greenfield lift station to be decommissioned. That's something we've been looking forward to for a long time as well. Engineering plans have been approved. Off-site easements for this phase have been executed and recorded. I mentioned the sanitary sewer already, and staff would recommend approval of this Meadows of Greenfield 8th plat with following conditions. They submit a revised plat if necessary. Plat's been reviewed and approved by our engineer already though. Submit a copy of the DNR land disturbance permit. Install and maintain sediment erosion controls throughout construction. Payment of the parkland fee. That is handled as part of a subdivision agreement that was attached in your packet. We'll collect that fee as part of each building permit. 5, submit a maintenance bond upon acceptance of public improvements. Submit as-built drawings upon acceptance of public improvements. Record the plat within 1 year of approval. Record covenants and restrictions and final plat ordinance with the plat. And develop a site in compliance with all city codes, conditions, requirements, plans, and payment of fees and taxes. There's a sample motion. Staff recommends that says, I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend the Board of Aldermen approve the Meadows Greenfield 8th plat, final plat with conditions as recommended by staff. And this plat would go to the Board of Aldermen after your consideration. If there are questions, I'm available, and Steve Saylor's available online as well.
Okay.
David, the temporary road that is off of 33 right now, is there another phase in that, would that road become permanent then?
No, are you talking about that temporary road that was the connection?
Yeah.
Emergency surface connection?
Yeah.
That won't be needed once they construct this. I think right now it's open so they can use it during construction, but then when Foxtail Drive and Prairie Creek Drive loop around, that can be removed.
Will there be any more, and I know this is just for my information only, are there any more connections onto 33?
In the future, there may be over by the pool at
Okay.
Meadowbrook Drive.
Okay.
They're not making that connection with this.
Okay.
The city is looking at maybe doing a roundabout at that location at some point in time, but they're dedicating right away that would assist with that.
Okay, thanks.
That was gonna be my question, because I would like to see another entry point into this neighborhood down there.
There are 2 connections, one at 19th Street and one at 21st Street, Greenfield Drive.
Oh, very far north of all of this
Right.
development, nothing close to where a lot of people live, though, so. That would be I would definitely want to see a connection down there somewhere.
What is it? Stub. Street A.
Northeast.
Yep. For future.
I don't have any other questions.
Anybody else? No? Well, would entertain a motion. We're ready?
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the Board of Aldermen to approve the Meadows at Greenfield 8th plat, final plat, with the conditions as recommended by staff. Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Second item,
Yes, Act 4B would be the zoning code amendment that was brought back from last month's meeting. I put together a new memo. The packet just includes proposed changes. I did not include the existing code sections that we did earlier. Just that packet last month was really long and I wanted to save a little space here. So I want to reiterate the main goals of the amendment were to assist the Board of Aldermen in some of their priorities for the year, including decreasing the minimum size of single-family lots, adding flexibility among the commercial and industrial zoning districts, including multifamily being allowed in some way in commercial areas, and creating a downtown overlay district. There were some extra changes in there that we had included. Going back to last month, so the update today, I kind of keyed some sections in the memo. If you saw, and I just want to go over each of those. So Shannon had mentioned the lot coverage requirements that we had in the code. The residential seemed too low, and the proposed commercial and industrial seemed too high. So I did an exercise where I took a single-family lot at the 60-foot wide proposed square footage, plopped in the biggest building that someone could build, put in a wide driveway, added some coverage in the backyard for accessory structures and things like that, and I came up with just under 60%. And so I proposed an update to the R1 section of 60%, and then from there I just added some extra in the other residential districts, assuming that they would be a little more dense or a little more impervious related to a single family. And then when we got to the commercial and industrial districts, we had then proposed at 90%, 90%, 100%. I just kind of used the R4 zone at 70% as kind of that minimum, and the industrial went just a little bit higher than that. So that was my logic. May not have been the best logic, but that's kind of how I worked that. So the code, the proposed code section in the packet has those updated numbers that show up on the very last column of the table in that section on the memo, heading of new proposed lot coverages. And then there was discussion about minimum livable floor area. The city currently has 1,100 square feet as a minimum livable floor area. Staff didn't propose to change that, but there was some talk about it last month. So I pulled up some codes from other communities in the metro area, some of our I would call them kind of our peer cities, to see how they compare. Blue Springs has a tiered system that ranges between 850 square feet to 2,600 square feet. I think what they do is, as a subdivision goes in, they look at maybe what is existing surrounding, and so you can't go too small or too big compared to them. They probably want you within a couple of categories, so you kind of get a tiered look throughout the city. Lee Summit was 750 square feet, which was mentioned at the meeting last month. Liberty is 864 square feet. Parkville goes down to 900 square feet on a 7,500 square foot lot, which is our current minimum square footage of lot. And then Smithville's at 1,100 as well. I did not update the code to change to 1,100 square feet. So I'm hoping that we get direction from the board if there's a recommendation to do something a little different. Design criteria or conditions for accessory dwelling units. A board member asked if we had some design criteria or conditions. I think that was because we had external accessory dwelling units listed as a conditional use permit in a couple of the code sections. Also, when we went to the Board of Aldermen, there were some questions about, well, maybe parking should be required, or how would utilities be addressed? And because there were some extra questions, I just thought, well, let's just remove it from this proposed section. It's something that we added in. It wasn't really part of the board's priorities for doing the amendment. And then that would give us some time to maybe put together an ordinance just on accessory dwelling units and then bring that back at a later date. Hopefully that's okay. If not, we can figure something out. Visual representation of houses on smaller lots is something that Paula asked about. So in the packet, we have, and I can bring that up on the screen. I didn't get my scale good. I usually try to do 8.5 by 11 sheets so everything looks the same, but I missed it on this one, so it's a big blow up. But there was some small text. So we have an exhibit, a couple of different things. We can get there. Here we go. All right, so there's an exhibit in the packet that shows 8,000 square foot lot, which we don't have. We're at 7,500 and we go a little bit smaller. I think we just squared it off because 80 foot wide, 60 foot wide, I think 40 foot wide. And that shows an 1,100 square foot house on an 8,000 square foot footprint, sorry. And then a 750 square foot footprint on an 80 foot wide lot. Not maneuvering very well, am I? Try that. 1,100 square foot lot on a house on a 60 foot wide lot. And then to the right of that, a 750 square foot footprint on a 60 foot wide lot. And then below that on the exhibit, 1,100 square foot. Typically we're rotated where we're wider and not as deep. A 40 foot wide lot with an 1,100 square foot footprint and a 750 square foot footprint on a 40 foot wide lot. Hopefully that's helpful. I went through and added some photographs, and these are from a neighborhood in town. This was in Village of River Meadows, so this is south of Meadowbrook Drive. And this row of houses are all on 60 foot wide lots. They have detached garages. A lot of times we'll see like split level house would have an attached garage. And so the house would end up being wider and you'd see the two garage spaces there. And then another exhibit also in Village of River Meadows. Different houses on even narrower than 60 foot wide lots. So this 2-story, 1,600 square foot house is on a 52 foot wide lot, 1,200 square foot house on a 47 foot wide lot and a 1,450 square foot house on a 60-foot wide lot. All three have detached garages behind. Hopefully that was a little helpful. And then if we go to Google Earth, there's a neighborhood on 291 northwest of I-35. So Kansas City, Liberty School District area, Liberty area. If you know the Quick Trip over there, just up from the Quick Trip. The houses here are on 50-foot wide lots. These houses over here are on 40-foot wide lots. And then this row, they've got some duplexes over here too. I don't know if you wanna, we can drop in there. And see how that neighborhood is with the 50-foot wide lot. Hopefully that's helpful, and then we can go drop over. Now I think these are probably all going to look fairly similar to each other. There we go. Got the trees in the way, don't we? Looks like maybe single car. These would be single car, yeah, single car garages on a 40-foot wide lot. So hopefully that kind of helps you with
Yep.
your question. And then creating an R1B district to reduce minimum lot size. So we had a member of the Board of Aldermen recommend maybe we create a new district called R1B to handle the proposed change in the reduction of the lots from 8,250 square feet, so 75-foot wide lots to the 60-foot wide lots. And their reasoning there is we have subdivisions that have already been zoned and platted. If the subdivision isn't built out, then those subdivisions could potentially come back through a process and make the lots smaller in comparison to what was originally planned. And having it as a different zoning district would mean a rezoning, and so then it would go through a hearing process to do that. And so that was their reasoning for doing that. We can do that. I think that'd be easy to make a new zoning district. Might take a little time to get to the Board of Aldermen having to do a new section, but we could do it that way. And it's understandable. And if we do that, then some other things, it can address some other things. For example, in our current R1, we have 1,100 square foot for a minimum floor area. If we were to do a different number, we could do that in an R1B zoning district, or leave the current setbacks the same. So the rear yard setback we currently have is 30% the depth of the lot, but need not be more than 30 feet for the rear yard setback. I think we're proposing to change that to 25 instead of 30. And so, those are some things that we could do if we did an R1B district instead of just updating our R1 district. And then the Board of Aldermen had some concern about reducing the parking requirements for multifamily. And so I looked at those same communities to see, well, how do they address parking? And I created a scenario based on a previous project and assumed that half of those units would be 1 bedroom, half the units would be 2 bedroom, and calculated what our proposed parking requirements, how many spaces would be required, and then compared that to the other communities. And we would be the lowest with Parkville in that scenario. And rather than be the lowest, my thought was in the update, I just went with the next lowest, and that was Liberty at 1.7 spaces per dwelling unit. If the board thinks something different makes a little more sense, I'm open to update as well. They each of those communities, they kind of make sense. You know, it tends to be the smaller number of bedrooms, the fewer spaces required. The more bedrooms, the more spaces required. And so those are the changes we made for the zoning code update. Staff would recommend approval, of course. If you'd like a change, then, you know, be sure to note what those changes might be in your motion.
Is this a public meeting?
It's a public meeting, not a public hearing.
Public
We already
hearing,
had the public-
thank you.
Yeah, already had the public
Where is it?
hearing. Yeah,
Okay.
already had a public hearing.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's online. We have Ryan's online, and then Carolyn Yatsuk, our economic development person's online too.
Just time for discussion. We want to start?
I still would like to see the minimum lot or the minimum house size reduced somewhat. So if you take the average of what you've got here, it's a little over 900 square feet. I mean, it's tough to build a small house like that. Giving someone an option, the ability, and this is 900 livable, so it doesn't include the garage, doesn't include non-habitable space. So there's garage requirements, correct? So it's going to look larger than, that's just 900 square feet of living space. So that's, you know, larger than a 3-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. And it gives options for people to build an affordable house. Housing costs are crazy expensive right now. So that is kind of my thought, you know, let's just not be the highest, not be the lowest. Kind of shoot for that middle ground. And that's about, I'd say 900 square feet. Kind of about where it's at. So that's my thought on that.
Is somebody at 900?
Yeah, there's.
Yeah, it'd be Parkville.
Parking, I guess we just kind of scroll through my comments. Minimal living space. I'm fine. The lot coverages look better. I think it's a good start. It, you know, keeps some green space in our commercial and industrial, allows a little more dense in the residential, but not too dense in the R1, which is your typical standard single family. R2, R3, R4, that's where you start to get your multifamily stuff. So it would make sense to be a little bit more dense. So I kind of like those, what you got proposed there. Parking is a big one for me. I can tell you at least some of the standards are really high. Smithville is crazy high, 3 per unit.
Yeah.
That's pretty
The
amazing.
Smithville I thought was really high.
I mean, if you have a
That's
studio.
what I found online. It could be that maybe they have changed or they do something a little bit different, or maybe there's a different way that you could propose less, but that's what it looked like.
Yeah, I mean, if you think you have a 1-bedroom apartment, right? So most apartments that are being built today are 1 and 2 bedrooms. You're assuming a lot for a 1-bedroom. That's a lot, 3 per, but
And even on a 3-bedroom, I can picture, you know, a family with a kid or two, and
yeah,
they wouldn't necessarily need 3 spaces.
yeah. I can tell you last time I built a 3-bedroom apartment. They just don't build very many of them. So then at least some of the standards that I'm super familiar with. So we routinely reduce it when plans come through because there's just so much. You know, you're just we have a unit per unit for visitor parking. That's assuming that at any one given time, half of everyone has a visitor there. So I mean, I'm a proponent of reducing them. I think the 1.5 is good. I'm comfortable with 1.7. That's typically what our average has been, right around that 1.7, 1.9 per unit. So I'm good with that. Either, you know, what the board.
In tonight's proposal, it has the 1.7.
1.7.
You know, then, yeah.
So I'm comfortable with that. If someone comes in and says, hey, you know, I have some kind of special thing going on at my unit, so it's a retirement community. Do they have the option to come and say, I don't need 1.7 per because most of my residents don't drive? Is there an option when the plan comes through to get that reduced?
I
Or-
think that we do have some language about parking study and,
Like alternate
take
parking
special-
plan?
special approval, but
Yeah, okay, I'm fine with that, because we got that as well. So. And then the R1B, I like it, right, that gives the option if someone was to come in and make a community residential and neighborhood or whatever, they can go through that kind of plan and say, hey, I want this type of neighborhood. So if you want to come back with an R1B zoning district, I'd be all for it.
Yeah,
That's it.
Oh.
That's all I got.
okay, I didn't want to interrupt.
No.
I would be good on the R1B if that's where we said the smaller houses are good. I think just knowing from what I heard at our last board meeting, I don't know that you're gonna get buy-in with the rest of the board on reducing houses on our normal size lots to 900 square feet. If it's something that's specific, it's a small community or something like that, I think you'll get better buy-in from the board itself. That's just my opinion. I think the 900 square foot houses in an R1B are great. I think that's an option. Thank you, because I've been looking at that. We have a little critter crawling around up here.
Not anymore.
And I think those kind of neighborhoods at some point in our future will have a purpose, and I think that's good. By the same token, the parking on the apartment buildings, I like the idea of breaking it out by what a building is composed of. If far into the future, somebody came in here and said, I'm just gonna build a building full of efficiency apartments, we do not need almost 2 parking spaces per apartment. So unless there's an easy way for them to request less, then I think it makes more sense in our codes to break it out by the type of, like Blue Springs or Lee Summit or Parkville. And I don't know that we need to even consider visitor parking. But again, that's kind of what the rest of you guys want to do. And that's all.
So, yeah, in that scenario, so the Parkville would have been the same as what we were proposing.
Is it about a 1.7?
Well, we originally proposed 1.5 and got 360 spaces in the imaginary scenario. And so Parkville we came up with the same amount. And so if we're going to break it down by size of bedroom, it probably makes sense to follow what Blue Springs has, because it would be more than what the 1.5 would be that we were proposing.
How many, you did 240 units?
Yeah,
What was the breakdown of the 240 units?
half and half.
Half and half, half
I don't know if that's typical, so half 1 bedroom, half 2 bedroom.
Yeah, it's usually about right.
So if we just did a flat 1.7, then it's 408 spaces, which is what Liberty is.
Yeah, but then you don't have that efficiency
Right.
option that you were thinking of.
Well, and again, if it's I don't want developers to have to jump through a million hoops. If it's an easy process for them to request, to say, hey, these are all efficiency apartments, we're gonna have one person, and for the most part, we're gonna have one person living in there. We're not gonna have. Then if the city can say, oh, well, in that case, then yeah, we don't need, maybe we need 1.25 parking spaces instead of 1.7 or something like that. I just don't, And this may be thinking way into the future, and we'll change this 3 times before that happens. But I feel like we should take that into consideration. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, we're going down the line, I guess I'll go next. Thank you for pulling all this together.
Hopefully it was helpful.
It was helpful, and I did some Googling and lots of how do you get people to build smaller homes in your community. So the one thing that obviously wouldn't go in here, but I would like to strongly encourage the board to do is think of economic incentives for people to build smaller homes, not just economic incentives for commercial properties and businesses, because there's such a need right now. You can't rent a house in Kearney for less than $1,800 a month. And that's more than a lot of mortgages are. So we just really have a need for those single parent families and young kids just starting out with their families, or not even, they're just a young couple and they're, still, or a retired couple who wants to stay in Kearney but downsize and they're on a fixed income. So that's my plea to, we can find a way to create economic incentives for them.
We feel that's kind of what we're trying to do is by
A little bit.
doing some lot reduction and parking reduction and
The thing
maybe
that-
square foot reduction, and that helps with their increased density, potential density, that would help with. some-
Yes. Some of the things I read though really suggested deals on permits, the kind of deals that we would give to people for building, like commercial buildings where we might waive something, whatever, those sort of fees in order to just make it just that much easier. That's not really for this, but that's just my general plea. I love all of this. I like the lot size, lot coverages. Probably the smallest I would want to go is 900 square feet and on the livable space. And I do like the idea of it being sort of a community that's sort of zoned that way. So the R1B or whatever it was called. I think that makes a lot of sense. So that it's almost like that neighborhood down there by Meadow, whatever.
River Meadows.
Yeah, it's a very unique little neighborhood. I'd like to see more of those types of neighborhoods. I think it's a really neat neighborhood. So I really liked that. I would lean towards either making the parking sort of tiered, like some of these communities that have it tiered, or if the language is clear enough that it can be adjusted, the 1.7, for like, as Kathy said, like if it's a bunch of efficiencies or just one bedroom places.
I recommend that we go ahead and tier it, just so it's out there. I think the way that the code says, if there's a use that's not represented already, then, do that study. So I think maybe tiering it will be a little bit clearer up front.
Yeah, and then they wouldn't have to do the study as long as they could do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be the way. But I think this is, I like these changes. That's fine, made 2 cents. And thank you for doing all that.
My turn.
Your turn. Save the best for
I
last.
was glad to hear the 900 square feet because 700, I was gonna get on my soapbox, but I think 900 is a workable deal. The tiered parking, I think that would be fine. Whether we go add the half a unit, half for one,
For the visitor parking.
yeah, for the visitor. We've got friends that live in various types of apartments, townhomes, and I hate going to their houses because there is never any place to park. And I'm true. It's just,
Yep.
So, and I know that parking spaces do not make the builder any money, but I think the more we can add, the better off the people that end up in those units are gonna be. So, I would like Lee Summit, and I think Smithville's probably a little rich. But I think Lee Summit would, something along those lines would be fine.
I can support that. I know I voiced one that said we don't need it, but I can support that. I can understand what you're talking about.
I can tell you the average cost to build per parking space is in the thousands of dollars. So if we're looking at trying to reduce.
Did you say 1,000?
A few thousand.
Few thousand.
So 5,000 to 8,000 per
Okay.
space. So, when we start adding spaces, it seems, easy to add a few more spaces here, a few more spaces there, that number goes up. And that all gets calculated in the rent.
Right, I understand
so-
that. And it cuts down on the amount of units.
Oh, yeah.
So I
Yeah.
understand all
So
that.
it's a good calculation, and just, looking into the future, are we gonna need as many parking spaces, 10 years from down the road, 20 years down the road? I
If
don't know.
everybody Ubers all the time, you don't really own a car.
Do
you
your
just-
phone and, when those driverless cars show up. I don't know if we'll get quite there or when we'll get there, but, yeah, I'm good with a tiered because it kind of helps you with what you're proposing. It's not hard to calculate, it's pretty straightforward. As long as there's, that alternate parking plan ability to come in and say, hey, you have the one size fits all chart, or you have the other customize it to your project. I like the two options. I'm more on the other side where I like it a little lower, but that's just because I don't, that helps reduce stormwater runoff. Stormwater runoff is a huge driver of cost in development. Means that we just kicked over 10,000 people. That's going to be a huge driver in development costs in the future here. So anything you can do to kind of help with that, it's not a one bite fixes it. One thing solution. You got to take those little bites here and there. So kind of keeping the parking maybe a little bit lower helps reduce that as well. Now I'll get off my soapbox. So I would like to see maybe, just mere Parkville, and not just because it's one of the, it's a little bit lower, but also because it's probably our closest direct competitor. Smithville doesn't count because they're so high that it's crazy. But yeah. I mean, if that's a little too low for you, and Blue Springs is not bad either.
I'd rather see Blue Springs than I would.
That is exactly what I was gonna say.
It's not the hill I want to die on, so. It's not Lee Summer Parkville, so.
Well, I mean, I'd probably lean towards Lee Summit minus the half per unit per visitor parking, not to just be in.
So that's exactly the same as.
It's Parkville, really. Well,
One per efficiency, one,
that would have ended up as 360.
I guess, it's a little bit higher.
because it's 1.5 per one or
Yeah.
two bedroom units.
Yeah. You keep
Yeah,
the two
so that would have been
bedrooms.
360. The only difference is they add the extra visitor parking.
Yeah, that's that visitor parking is a huge pushback.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But I also just like going places where I can't park to visit my friends. We also,
But did you have to walk 3 blocks to get to their house?
Well, yeah, you can
so-
always find a spot, but
that part's not so bad. I had a friend that lived downtown and it was really annoying, right?
yeah.
But then you might be parking
They have
blocks
paid, well, they all
away.
have paid park space.
True. Back then, you didn't have to pay as often to park. Not to show our age, but now, yes, almost every road down there is
Just makes
pay to park.
structured parking requirement.
Well, so we probably need to pick which of these tiers we like best. They're so all close to each other. So if you do lease Summit minus the half unit per parking, then that takes you down to all the way down to 360?
We could do a little different and do like, so I proposed Liberty at 1.7. We could do a slight tier where it's 1 per efficiency and 1.7 generally. That way it's pretty much 1.7 unless you have efficiencies, and then you could just go down
Then
to
we give
1.
the flexibility, right, of the,
Yeah.
What do you define as an efficiency though?
no bedroom.
Do we define it?
Yeah, I don't know if we define it.
Because efficiency or studio.
To me, it would be a studio apartment where
That's
you don't
what I
have
was
bedrooms,
picturing.
it's just
Yeah.
an open area.
So one per efficiency / studio, and then 1.7 for the rest. I guess it's somewhat of a tier, pretty straightforward, easy to calculate.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
All right,
You like that one?
we like that one.
Okay.
Okay, look at us. It sounded like we were all happy with the lot coverage changes, the new proposed lot coverage changes.
And adding the R1B.
Yeah. And the 900 square foot on an R1B, but keeping it 1,100 other places. And that only applies to single-family homes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, not to like multifamily housing. All right,
So that might be if the board, so if the P and Z thinks it makes sense to have, leave our current R1, and then propose the changes in an R1B, then that R1B can include 900 square foot instead of 1,100. And then, every other change that we've already proposed, so 60, the 60-foot wide, 6,000 square foot, the setbacks requirements might change. So maybe in a motion, approve proposed ordinance with the following changes: multifamily parking, calculation at 1 space per efficiency plus 1.7 per unit generally, and creation of an R1B district that would include the proposed changes, in addition to reducing the 1,100 square foot minimum livable floor area to 900 square foot.
I think that's the longest motion I've ever heard.
And I'm not making a motion.
right, you gotta make it, someone's
That's what he
gotta,
said.
someone's gotta go in and do it.
Because I think
Bring us home, Shannon.
it seems like any proposed change can fall into those 2 categories. One is the parking, and then one is create the R1B to do the other R1 changes that are proposed.
All right, so I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend the Board of Aldermen approve an ordinance updating the zoning code, including the proposed changes as outlined in staff letter, with the amendments that we create an R1B
R1B?
R1B
Yes.
zoning district with a 900 square foot minimum dwelling size and the lot changes as proposed. And update the parking requirements for 1 per studio or efficiency unit and 1.7 for the remainder.
Generally, this was a word, yeah, Parkville uses, it's 1.5 spaces generally.
It's just
I
added
like that one. Okay, just 1.7
1.7
per unit.
per unit. And I think here we go. Is that it?
I think so.
I think I hit
The everything.
Yeah, I think you
the
got
other
it.
things
Sounds
that
good.
you guys were fine,
Yeah.
lot coverage
Yep.
was the other thing,
Yeah.
and you guys were fine with the way it was.
Yes.
written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to pull the,
And then pull the ADU, accessory dwelling units, and
later.
then we'll work on
Yeah.
another ordinance and come back and.
Yep.
I tried to cover that with as outlined in staff letter.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And the way, so the land use table, if you looked, sorry, I'm going off, but we're leaving them as a land use. We're just not marking anything permitted or conditional use. It'd be just kind of holding for that, and then we'll come back and address it.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. I believe that was everything on the agenda.
Yes, thank you.
Any other further discussion?
I have one thing, and it just hit me tonight when I was reading through some of this stuff. The park fees. The park fees have been $325 per unit since I have been on this board, and I came on this board in 2001. So we're talking about 2 decades of the same price. I know that one of the things that city staff is looking at all fees. I definitely think we need to look at that fee, but I'm wondering if there's a way to automatically accelerate them, like, so it's $300 today, but because of inflation, it's now $310. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So I'm just throwing that out there because sometimes I think when we say, oh, well, we're going to raise our fees from $325 to $400, that sounds terrible. But the reality is we haven't raised those fees in almost 25 years. And they would probably be that if we had been raising them all along. And so I don't know if that, I'm just throwing that out there, like we can talk about it or not talk about it, but it just feels like it might be less painful if we automatically adjusted our fees with inflation.
Yep. Was it the consumer price index or whatever?
Why are you making that
I
face?
thought maybe Sheila might want to say something. I had something to say, but I also,
It is a legal question. We'll ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the park fee tied just to a single family or just to residential?
residential.
Is there
Yeah,
no
and
fee
I
attached?
believe that fee was, I don't know the history of the fee, I just know it was $325. And what that payment had been going towards for a long time was Jesse James Park, was a park, and so.
Was there,
A note on that, so it was paying into Jesse James Park.
so, just help me understand the fee. So if someone comes in and builds a house, they pay $325.
It's part of the, yeah,
Per
generally it's part of the building permit.
Per
So
unit.
the way it is, it's actually, the way the code's written, like this Meadows of Greenfield would need to pay the number of lots times 325 up front, unless there's a subdivision agreement, and it's just a little agreement that says, please collect at the time of building permit.
So it's
we
collected
collect.
on the time of building permit.
Yep.
Has there been any talk about a commercial and industrial fee per square foot?
We haven't in the past,
So-
and I think the reason for that is because the parks are enjoyed by the residents, and so that's the way it was written.
Right, so we just implemented one, and I don't like the way we calculate it, but they didn't ask me. It's calculated per bedroom, up to a max of 4 bedrooms, it's $250 per bedroom. And then it's a square footage based on commercial and industrial, so you still get most of your money from the residential because there's just more of that. But it's still, everyone has a little skin in the game. It's a way to kind of spread that out.
Well, you have people, visitors that come to visit, and they'll stop at the grocery or the Walmart or whatever, but they're coming to enjoy the parks.
Yeah,
Or a
and
ball game, kids, relatives' ball games
Yeah.
or something, so yeah.
And I like that because it kind of helps spread that out. It helps keeps those fees lower for the residents because every little thing goes into that housing cost. It just kind of drives that cost up a little bit here, a little bit there. In the scheme of things, of building a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 house, another couple $100, it's probably not make or break. But it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I was going to say that just a little bit of history. When we originally were talking about this, they could either basically donate land for a park or fee in lieu of. There was a really big push at one point while I was at the beginning of my term in planning and zoning that they didn't want pocket parks because pocket parks are harder to maintain and police and all that. And so they wanted to just do the bigger parks. And so they kind of got away from that. And I don't even know if that's still even an option, but.
I don't mind the donation of parks, but obviously the parks are gonna have to accept it, so that would get away from, they don't want the parks, we're not taking it. It does create some tracking issues, so kind of we're running into now, how do you implement that, how do you track that over the long haul, like, because we do it based on a credit, so if the land's valued at $400,000, you get $400,000 worth of credit towards those fees, but the fees are paid by the builder, not the developer, so how do you track that? So it does get kind of complicated in the long run. And some of these, we have subdivisions that don't build out for, 20-year build outs. So it's a long-term tracking issue. So, but it's a good way to get land for the parks. So I would definitely want to, highly recommend considering the payment in lieu of. And definitely if it makes sense for the Parks Department in the city, and it's not just give me whatever piece of floodplain you have that's available.
Right.
But just, so. But I think that's, I don't know, is that more of a Board of Aldermen conversation than it is Planning Commission?
I do think it's a good point though, like all of it, erasing the.
It's been the same for a long time.
Yeah, that's a long time. And land is definitely more expensive.
What's the average bedroom count for the new construction? 3-bedroom?
I don't know.
No.
Probably at least 3 to 4,
Yeah.
based on the square footages of the houses that we average.
That's it.
2,500 square foot.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
And lots of 3-car garages. That's like
A
Dublin.
few.
Yeah.
I would strongly recommend tying it to per unit, not per bedroom.
Okay.
So don't make that change because then it's a fight up. It's not a bedroom. It's
Yeah.
a study.
It's an office. It's an office.
It's an office.
Anything else for the good of the order? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?